Hi everyone, it's me, Tim, and today I want to talk about modding the original Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. But before I go into that, let me just say that a lot of people ask me about modding and what I think of current mods and mods for different games. I love them. I've said I loved them. I'm not going to review them, but I've been playing and enjoying mods since probably back in the 90s with Quake. And as recently as Fallout 4, the last time I played it, I did a playthrough. And then after I finished the main story arc, I loaded in a bunch of mods just to see what people were doing with that game. And also, when I tell people if you're thinking about getting a job in the game industry and you should make a demo, modding an existing game is perfectly okay. If you have an idea for a cool new feature and you can take an existing game and just mod that feature in to show off how it would work and how it makes the game, and if you can demonstrate like how it makes the game better, perfect. We hired someone for Outer Worlds based on a mod he made for Skyrim. So it happens, people pay attention to that stuff, and I can tell you that that guy's mod, moved his resume to the top of the pile. So if you're thinking about modding, do it. But what I want to talk about today, because I'm going through all my stuff, people have asked me to go through it too, and they like hearing old stories from when I played AD&D a lot in high school and college and grad school, and a little bit at early interplay. So that was about 20 years of playing AD&D. So I have a lot of stuff on it. This is one of my books. I told you my mom worked for the Judge Advocate General's office. She came home one day with a few of these. This is the California Power and Light Company Orientation Manual for Nuclear and Fossil Operations Personnel. There was nothing inside, so I filled it with this is my campaign notes, and these are all the NPCs that my high school campaign hired, and then a bunch of other notes, which is what I want to talk about. But I've got another one that's just full of all the dungeons that I made by hand because I didn't have a lot of money. So I ended up making a lot of dungeons by myself without, that meant I didn't have to go out and buy them. But one thing I want to talk about was, I know with basic D&D and with AD&D, they encouraged you to change things. I believe the beginning of the Dungeon Master's Guide, Gary Gygax even talks about, while the general framework should be the same, individual DMs are free to pick and choose what they want to include. And in my campaign, we did a lot of that right at the beginning. We decided to go with the 4d6 generation method, which was an optional method from the DM's Guide, and we didn't use the other ones. That was for attributes. We got rid of the weird restriction that women couldn't have higher than an 1850. That was explained to me by my graduate student group, that it was a dumb rule and we got rid of it. There are some other things we got rid of, like we had a house rule that said if you rolled more than one attribute that was less than 6, you could just re-roll the whole character, which kind of made sense because the rule said you had to be a particular class if you were under 6, and you can't be 2 classes. I mean, I suppose you could make a multi-class, but it seems to imply you can't be any other class but that one. Some of the things we threw away, like the grappling rules in the DM's Guide, we just threw those away. They were complicated and nonsensical and blah. We also threw away, in the player's handbook, there's this big chart, which is weapons versus base armor type. And it was an adjustment on the 2-hit for weapons versus base armor types. We threw it away mainly because it was really hard to determine the base armor type of non-humanoid wearing armor. Like if a lizard man is AC 7, is that leather or is that something else? If a dragon's AC 0, well, the base armor type only goes down to 2. So what do you do with a 0? So we just threw all that out. But we also extended the game. And by we, I should say, I started extending my own D&D campaign. I made additional rules. Some of them I made up. In fact, the first one I'm going to show you, I know I made this one up. Some of them I think I either read in a magazine, probably Dragon, or saw in a module, and I copied it out. But when I copied it, I made changes, and now 40 years later, I don't remember what my changes were. So I'm going to show them to you. So let's go through the biggest 4 that I found in this California Operations Manual folder. And these are changes I made to my high school AD&D campaign. So here's the first one. Boom. These are called Major Malevolent, Minor Malevolent, Neutral, Minor Benign, and Major Benign changes to your character. We did this for a while. What happened was when you made a character, you rolled percentile dice. You can see at the top. If you rolled under 95, nothing happened. If you rolled a 96 to 99, you rolled once on this table. And if you rolled double zeros, you rolled twice. Now, if you rolled under 40, you got something bad. And if you rolled over 75, you got something good. Of course, everybody wanted the good stuff. It was things like regeneration and ultravision and infravision and really cool stuff. But the bad stuff was really bad, like being deaf or blind or losing points on your attributes. We made this. Now, keep in mind, this predates me ever seeing GURPS by at least a decade. But this is basically GURPS advantages and disadvantages, just a poorly thought out version because there's, who knows what you're going to get, and you get no bonus for getting a penalty, and you get no penalty for getting a bonus. So it's really unbalanced. People loved if they happened to get a really good benign one. They hated if they got something bad. They'd often ask to re-roll or something, and I made them play. I think we ended up stopping using this when my friend William made a character and he rolled double zeros, which means he had to roll twice. He literally rolled 2 major malevolent things. His character was blind and had hemophilia. What that meant was he couldn't see, and if he ever got hit with a impaling or cutting damage weapon, he would bleed until he was fully healed. Guess what? He wanted to re-roll. I wouldn't let him. His character died in the first battle, and he didn't even try to live. He was like, this is a dumb character. I'm getting rid of it. So this wasn't really a pretty smart thing to do. But we used it for a while, and it was interesting. It was fun. Maybe this is the origin. Maybe I should call this the origin of flaws. Maybe I should have brought this up when I talked about the evolution of flaws. But this, to me, is kind of like my first thing of chewing on advantages and disadvantages, perks and flaws in D&D when I was 14 years old. Another thing I did, this is a major modification, and we kept this one. Everybody loved this one. When you made a character, you had to pick a god. And I had all the gods, and I had them all. I had a big chart for, depending on your class and alignment, here were the gods you could worship. Also, there was a sub-table for if you were a particular race. Here were some additional gods, like the elven gods could be worshipped by elves of any class or alignment. And then there were even some NPC, like here's what sailors tend to worship. Here's who sages tend to worship. But what I did special for clerics, and this was really popular, and this is well before D&D version 3 introduced something like this. Every deity granted an ability and a restriction to their clerics. So, for example, if you were a cleric of Astort, your ability was 1 undetectable lie and 1 phantasmal force per day. So once per day, you could just say, I'm going to lie, and there's no spell would detect it, and the person would believe it. And 1 time per day, you could cast a phantasmal force as if you were throwing the spell, the magic spell. But the restriction was, every time you went up a level, there was a 5% chance per level you became a pathological liar. Once that happened, you always lied. You lied about everything. You never, ever told the truth. Interesting character adjustments. Asura, which was the one right after Stort, this was the one that was most popular because one of my long-running characters or players had a character who was a cleric of Asura. And their ability was they could see through illusions and disguises with the same chance as a thief of the same level pickpocketing minus the disguiser's level. And 2 clerics could also communicate 2 sentences of 25 words or less with no range, as long as one of them knows the other's general whereabouts. That was super powerful. But the restriction was they had to hide their temples with great care in every country except Vendaya, which was the country of their origin. And they also had to burn any waste products coming off of them, including their hair. So that was a huge restriction, and I kept my friend Joel, cleric. He had to follow these restrictions. And that was hard. You're in a dungeon. You have to make sure that anything that comes off, you can't just discard something. You had to keep it to destroy it later. He was the player who eventually kept a pit of green slime in the bottom of his temple in the basement, and he'd just go throw things in there at the end of the day. So what I loved about this is it made clerics more interesting, and it made the characters that the clerics were more interesting. And we used this throughout my entire campaign run. One of the things I should have mentioned when I did the economy video was I actually experimented with economy measures in my original D&D campaign in order to keep money in check. I think I found this in a magazine. I honestly don't remember. But this was an addition. In D&D, you had to pay money to go up a level. It was 1,500 gold times the level you were going from. So if you were second level and you were going up to third, it would cost you 3,000 gold to go up a level. What I did here was there was basically taxes and duties on things. So if you brought goods into a city, you had to pay 1% at the gate, or if they were luxury goods, 5%. And that's if you were a citizen of that country. If you were in another country, it was more. There was an entry fee into the town based on heads and wheels. So if you were riding a cart with a donkey pulling it, that's 2 heads and 4 wheels. There was an annual tax that was levied on people. There were sales taxes on anything you sold in it. So maybe you had to pay a duty to bring it into the city, and then a sales tax when you sold it. Property taxes on buying stuff. Religious tithe for services, meaning you had to pay 10 gold per month. Plus you had to attend church. If you didn't, they would not give you services like cures and resurrections. There was a foreign currency exchange. Gems and jewelry had a much higher sales tax. If you had a guild, it cost 100 gold per level per month, but that usually paid off well because fighters guilds gave you access to mercenaries cheap, that you could hire. Thieves guilds gave you access to a black market goods vendor and lockpick sale, and then there was a toll road use. We used this for a bit of my campaign, and it did keep the money in check. It was just really hard to keep track of. I mean, in a computer game, this would be one thing, but doing this by hand, we just got tired of it really fast. The last big one I think I changed was I redid the falling damage in D&D. It was a D6 per 10 feet you fell past the first 10 feet. I thought that was a little normal, a little generic. So for a while we used this falling chart. Again, I think that I got this out of Dragon, but I don't know. It basically lets you roll percentile dice, and you might take less damage, per 10 feet. You might do the standard D6, but you might take even more, D8, D10, D12. There was also chances of getting sprains and breaking something, which would then require either rest, which remember would cost money. You have to go to an inn and rest for a month. Or you'd have to go to a temple and get a cure. And it better be a temple you're tithing at, or they're not going to do it. So these were all things I put in my campaign. I think this one eventually we got rid of too, because it was a form of realism that wasn't fun. And I have a whole video about that. So we eventually got rid of it. But the whole point of this is I played AD&D for a while unchanged. And then after a few months, we started doing our own mods. I think that makes sense for any game. And I think if you're a game developer, you probably should do that. I don't know a lot of people play board games without some house rules. Everybody had Monopoly house rules when they were kids. You start with house rules on board games. Go into your favorite video game and mod it. It's a great way of exploring your ideas with a very low barrier to entry other than learning how to mod. But the engine's there, the art's there. It's a great way of you exploring your own ideas. So that's kind of the theme of this video, but I also wanted to talk about mods I tried to do in AD&D when I was 14 years old. Anyway, hope you like that, and I'll see you tomorrow.